everyone. Thank you for joining us here at TrustCloud. We are super excited to talk to you all about some of the trends that we're seeing in risk management, the risk management space. We're going to walk through the who's, what, when, where, and whys of risk to help give a good overview of why you should care about it. So just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Molly Mullinger. I am head of sales engineering here at TrustCloud. Prior to joining the TrustCloud team, I was at EY, where I served in their consulting group, and I helped a number of organizations with setting up and assessing their risk environment. Since then, I've been in the GRC space for about 4 years now. So spent a lot of time talking to people about what they're doing from a risk perspective. I'm going to be joined here today by one of our product experts, Abheer. Abheer, do you mind giving a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, it's great to be here, Molly. Thank you for planning this and having me here. Hi, everyone. I'm Abheer Bipin. I am a senior product manager here at TrustCloud, and I'm responsible for a few different products within our GRC space. Really excited to talk to you about risks today and showcase our product as well as discuss trends in the entire risk management space in the industry. So great to be here. Thank you for having me, Molly.
So the first topic that I want to discuss is what is risk management? So risk management is really an organization's way of defining and understanding all of the risk events that could occur or anything that could go wrong for an organization when you're thinking about operating upon and meeting your organizational objectives. It's something that organizations are doing on a quarterly, annual basis in order to make sure that they understand exactly what risk events could occur within their environment, what risk events are rising and becoming more prevalent based on changes in the market and the economic environment, as well as any of the social or medical environments, as we've seen with the pandemic over the past 5 years. So it's increasingly important for companies to make sure that as they're focusing on risk management, they're thinking not only about what's happening right now, but then also thinking about what could happen, what could go wrong, and what do we have in place to help make sure that should that event happen, our company isn't impacted too greatly.
Yeah, there's a expression that we're using these days just to explain risk to people who are trying to just figure it out. And it's sort of like if you're on the Titanic and you're crossing the Atlantic Ocean, risks are like icebergs. They're going to be there. They're a part of your organization. You're not running away from them. What risk management as a function can do is not only help you steer around those icebergs, but if you do hit one of those icebergs on accident, then it at least give you enough life rafts or a big enough door that two people can float on. So that's really risk management in a nutshell. You're not getting away from it. You have to start at some point, and the sooner your organization really starts looking at risk, the better and easier the process gets over time, and the more insightful and data driven the process gets over time.
So on that note, Abheer, do you mind touching a little bit on why companies should care about risk management?
Yes, of course. So in general, if we look at risk management, and thank you for your definition on how it is and what it really is, but there are a few key areas as to why a company really needs to care about risk management. And quite frankly, the current situation we're in as in 2023, geopolitically, economically, there is a certain level of risk in the market, and it's important for organizations to understand the challenges ahead as well as actively prevent risks from taking place as a result of those. There's also a heightened sensitivity by stakeholders and regulators. So boards of directors, leadership teams are asking about risk. They're making risk-driven decisions. Regulators, from a standard perspective, for example, if you need a SOC 2 certification, a risk component is an essential area from a regulatory and framework perspective as well. But most importantly, I think risk is an essential component of how businesses operate and grow. So if I look at a startup customer who's predominantly focused on achieving a standard or a framework so they can enable their sales teams, for them, risk is sort of a compliance obligation or is a compliance function. Whereas if we move further towards more and more advanced use cases where you've got public companies and enterprises, for them, risk becomes a tool to guide the organization to avoid obstacles and to drive decision making. So wherever a company or wherever an individual sits on that spectrum between a startup and an enterprise customer, risk is an essential component for how they operate and, more importantly, how they grow. So, Molly, I had a question in terms of who really is asking about risk management?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you touched a little bit on regulators who are really touching on risk management or risk assessments that are being completed as a part of the requirements for meeting that particular standard. So, for standards such as SOC 2, ISO, NIST, they actually require that you go out and perform a risk assessment in order to meet uh, that requirement. So that's a very simple example of the first kind of people who are asking about risk. But I would say that as organizations are starting to be more forward focused and as they're trying to think through how they can make sure that they're meeting their strategic objectives, we've seen more and more interest from boards, leaders across the organization, as well as even investors who are looking to look into the organization. I would also say that we're probably going to see a continued increase in the number of people who are asking about your risk protocols and your risk approaches as the number of regulators that are kind of dipping their toe into the waters continues to increase, and as the number of requirements continue to increase and change and evolve in line with our constantly evolving world. I think it's really interesting when we talk about boards and how they're requesting risk information because it is a little bit different from the regulators. So the regulators tend to, when regulators are asking, people tend to approach it as a check the box type exercise. When boards are asking about it, they really want to know more about how their organization is performing, what they need to be aware of that might be at risk for that organization performing the way that we want it to, and how do we make sure that we can maintain business continuity when it feels like everything's all crazy? So it's really starting to shift into a type of decision making exercise that teams are using to understand where to invest to make sure that they're appropriately protecting their company. So, Abir, do you mind talking a little bit about how companies are doing this today and what challenges they're running into when it comes to performing these risk assessments?
Yeah, so I think to piggyback off your point earlier, where you're saying that risk is being used to drive organization decisions, particularly at a leadership level, I think that's where the first problem arises. Risk management currently is done predominantly through spreadsheets. And that makes reporting collaboration very, very challenging. But most importantly, spreadsheets are not real time as such. You're conducting an assessment, you're evaluating your risk profile at a point in time, and then you're saying, okay, I'll come back 6 months from now, 12 months from now, and reevaluate my risk posture. The challenge is with our rapidly moving, highly digitized world, the risks that you've put in today may not be valid 6 months from now, or they might be more risks that pop up between your assessment periods. And that's where, one of the challenges comes in with spreadsheets is that they're not real time. You're not monitoring anything. And generating a report for your board becomes very challenging, therefore making actions very, very challenging. Similarly, we're looking at point solutions as well. There are risk products out there in the market. This is not necessarily a concept that hasn't existed in the past. It's been a concept that's been there. But on their own, risk products also have the same challenge of real-time reporting. You're looking at controls for mitigation, for example. A point-in-time risk solution does not connect to the rest of your ecosystem, does not connect to the rest of your GRC program. And at TrustCloud, we want to build this trust assurance platform where all of these different elements within a GRC space are connected. And point solutions are not really able to collect all this information across an organization and make a data-driven decision on what should or should not be done. So that, pretty much sums up a few of the core issues we're seeing in the current risk management space. Of course, is collaboration. And one of the other issues is just around people outside of risk not really paying so much attention to risk and then collaborating across an organization, which makes, getting mitigated efforts done or satisfying risk requirements even more challenging, particularly within large organizations.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I could share some horror stories of reconciling Excel spreadsheets from across the organization and trying to help make sure that your stakeholders really understand the impact of the risks that they're being asked to address. So, really appreciate where you're at there. From your perspective, where do you see risk management going or evolving to in the future?
I think in 2023 particularly, it's sort of, I view it as a catalyst for change. You're going to see four effective trends coming out of this environment. The first one is predictive. Risk assessments currently, whether they're done at a 6 month mark or a 12-month mark, miss out a large number of events that take place between those two timeframes. So we're going to see a world where predictive risk or risk alerting becomes a fundamental component. You don't really have to wait for the assessment. You can do this on a more real-time basis as and when risks pop up within the organization. The second key area where we're seeing the market move is data-driven risk management. Right now, there's a subjectivity with risk. And as more and more information comes and as more data driven or data influenced practices permeate throughout an organization, we'll see the same trend taking place with risk, where data is used to justify why a risk is high or low versus just a subjective element based on emotion or gut instinct. Thirdly, we're seeing unified system of record. Uh, as described, I think point solutions or Excel solutions are very, very good at collecting information, but they're not good at doing it in real time. So we're going to see a trend where a unified system of record that spans across risk and GRC, that spans across compliance, that spans across sales enablement, becomes a connected ecosystem. So you can pull risk information from different areas rather than just focusing on manual input. And last and finally, we'll see an area of financial impact and progression being tagged or assigned to risks. As you mentioned, leadership teams are looking to risks to drive organizational decisions, drive organizational budgets. So being able to connect a risk with its financial impact or projected financial impact is going to be a critical component of where this industry is heading in the next 18 to 24 months as our economic climate and as the macro world really changes. So this brings me to a question for you, Molly. Like, where should teams start? Like, this is a lot of stuff to really wrap around and begin. So where should teams really go from here?
So there's a couple of different ways depending on where your organization is at from a maturity perspective. If you do have an existing risk program or risk environment, performing a risk rationalization effort is super valuable to go through your risks, understand what is still applicable or maybe not so applicable anymore, based on the changing and evolving world. If you don't have a program, a really great place to start is your controls. What are the things that your controls are helping to mitigate against? Why do you have them in place? And what are they kind of protecting you from in order to make sure that you really have a cohesive risk environment? There's also a number of solutions that are out there, as well as free resources to help identify a starting point for a risk register in order to make sure that as you're going through and you're thinking about everything that could get in the way of your organization's strategic objectives and the different ways that you should be thinking about risk, you're not starting from a blank sheet of paper because it's kind of hard to do that sometimes when you're just sitting there. So, collaborating with teams across the organization, understanding what they're worried about and what concerns they're seeing, and making sure that you're using the resources that are available to you are going to be incredibly helpful with building and creating that risk management program. And then continuing to run assessments on a regular basis. So, that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for listening in, and please feel free to leave your comments on where you think risk management is going, whether or not this was valuable, and please be sure to check out TrustCloud for more content like this.
Perfect. Thanks. Bye.